Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's special meeting of the Audit Committee. Roll call, please.
Audit Committee Member Richard Corral,
Present.
Ed Khachadurian,
Here.
Alex Parajon,
Present.
Tom O'Shaughnessy is absent today, Chair Zaria Mirian.
I am here. Let's move on to item number 2, please.
Number 2, the agenda for today, October 29th, 2018 Audit Committee meeting was posted on Thursday, October 25, 2018 on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Wonderful. Oral communications, I have no cards. I'll give an opportunity to the public. No? Okay, we'll move on. Item number 4, please.
It's approval of the minutes. Minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on July 23rd, 2018.
Okay.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second that.
Okay, roll call, please.
Audit Committee Member Richard Corral,
Approved.
Ed Khachadurian,
Yes.
Alex Parajon,
Approved.
Tom O'Shaughnessy absent, and Chair Zaria Mirian.
Aye. Item number 5, please.
Number 5 is action items, and we have none.
Item number 6, please.
Number 6, reports and information. Internal audit activity report as of 9/30/2018. Jesse Zhang, Internal Audit Manager.
Good morning, Ms. Chair and the Audit Committee members. My name is Jessie Zhang, Internal Audit Manager. This morning, I'd like to provide you a report of the internal audit activities for the quarter ended September 30th, 2018. The activity report has been preloaded to your iPads. If you feel free to follow along. At the beginning of the report, we numbered the sections that within the report for your easier reference. So the first section is completed project. During this past quarter, we have completed 2 projects. Please note that these do not include the continuous auditing projects we completed. That is has their own section 3. So we'll cover that later. The first project is completed by our senior internal auditor, Samil Salim. It is a performance audit of the Fire Prevention Bureau's operations. At this point, I would like to invite Samil to present his audit to you.
Good morning, Mr. Audit Committee Chair and committee members. My name is Samil Salim, and I'm going to be going over the Fire Prevention Bureau audit that I finished. Next slide, please. So the objective of the audit was to perform a high-level operational assessment of the Fire Prevention Bureau, and this was a management request in that they wanted the entire division to be looked at as opposed to, I'm going to talk about it a little later, they have a plan check side, for example, and that alone could have been an audit in and of itself, but they wanted everything, so we had to use a risk assessment like we always do, but to kind of help us, guide us where we're going to drill in or where we're going to keep it high level. So it was a little different in that respect. The audit covered fiscal year 2017 and 18. Next slide. Methodology, so we reviewed the regulatory requirements. We conducted interviews and walkthroughs with both Fire Prevention Bureau staff and Building and Safety. We conducted interviews with outside agencies. We met with the City of Los Angeles. We met with the California State Fire Marshal's Office, and we also met with the City of Burbank. And that was just to get an idea of what are other people doing and comparing ourselves to them. I also attended a 2-day fire life safety training held by the State Fire Marshal's Office, just to get an understanding of some of the requirements that a particular inspection has. And then we performed detailed test work on some areas just to come to our conclusions. So the next slide. So this slide is essentially giving you an overview of the basic areas that the Fire Prevention Bureau covers. The first category is what they call programmatic inspections. So there are 3 inspection types here, fire life safety, CUPA inspections, and industrial waste inspections. And just to give you a general idea, fire life safety inspections are inspections of the various buildings within the city for fire life safety issues like fire exits, fire protection systems, the sprinklers, the fire alarms, obstructions, fire doors, things of that nature that affect life safety, as the name implies. Coupa inspections are state mandated inspections, and those are inspections depending on the businesses within the city, what particular elements that they have. So for example, if they have an underground storage tank, it's subject to this inspection. If they have an above ground storage tank, it's subject to this. If they're a hazardous waste producer, or if they have hazardous waste materials on site, these businesses fall under the Coupa program. And lastly, industrial waste inspections, and this is just testing the wastewater discharge that comes from businesses just to prevent them from discharging hazardous wastewater into our water system. So that's programmatic inspections. Next, we have plan check and new construction inspections. So this side of the house, it's housed in building and safety area. And so whenever a building is constructed or remodeled, there may be fire implications such as fire sprinklers, fire alarms, that the plan check side reviews the plans. And then upon completion, these are then inspected under the new construction inspection side of the house. Household Hazardous Waste Collection Center. So this is a center we have for the city of Glendale residents. It's open twice a week, and it's basically to collect detergents, paints, all these hazardous waste that we don't want going into our landfills. So it's a service we provide to our residents to divert those type of materials. Vegetation management and weed abatement program. So this is essentially like the high fire zone areas for vegetation. How do we clear it and inspect it? We don't actually do the inspections. The Fire Prevention Bureau does not do the inspections for this. Rather, we have one person who manages the program, and the fire company does the actual inspections. So that, in a nutshell, is the Fire Prevention Bureau. Next slide, please. But as you can see from the previous slide, most of the full-time equivalents, so just the number of people working on it, are involved with inspection. So that's where we kind of kept our focus. And when you think of inspections, you kind of think of just going and doing an inspection and write them up, whatever. But there's a lot of steps involved with performing an inspection. So this slide was kind of here just to give you a little glimpse of. So you have to have a scheduling system to schedule your thousands of inspections and to make sure you're doing them when they're supposed to be done. You have to do the inspection. You have to document your inspection. You have to track if you have a violation. You have to track it. If you have enforcement, if someone is not complying, then you have secondary means like fines or such to help get more compliance. You have management reporting and reporting as a whole. You have billing and collection. So there's a lot that goes into rather than just doing an inspection. Next slide. This slide is just to give you an idea of an appreciation of the inspectors pretty much have their plates full. So these are the different inspections: so Coupa, fire life safety, industrial waste, the programmatic inspections I talked about, and new construction. Take the total inspection numbers with a grain of salt. As I mentioned in the report, we had some data discrepancy issues depending on the system used for the total counts, but nonetheless, it gives you a good idea of when you take the total inspections divided by the number of resources to do the inspections, there's a lot of inspections per inspector. So again, it's just to show how much work is potentially out there. Next slide, please. So take in what it takes to do an inspection and all the inspections that need to be done. Our conclusion is not too surprising in that the Fire Prevention Bureau is challenged to keep up with their current workload. And this is not uncommon based on our discussions with other agencies. And some of the reasons why we came to that conclusions are the first three bullets there. First and foremost is that the inspection frequencies are not based on risk, and in some cases they're more frequent than what the regulatory bodies call for. For example, industrial waste inspections and fire life safety inspections, some of the programmatic inspections. Fire life safety inspections has 4 basic inspections that they mandate to be done annually, with the exception of jails every 2 years. But we chose to inspect everything annually. Likewise, with industrial waste inspections, they only require significant industrial users, which is basically, think of it as a large business, to be inspected at least once a year. But we only have 10 such facilities within the cities. The remaining 434 out of the 444 they're not mandated as far as how often we need to inspect them. So that's number one, that we're doing more than we need to be doing as per the codes. Second is that we're not using a risk-based approach. Risk-based assessment, I mean, we do it when we do audits, but it's really everywhere now, and it's something that's even coming down to the fire stations, because everyone's dealing with the need. You have to do more with less, right? So we can't operate under the same old model where we're at full staff and we have the resources to do it. So how do we get the most bang for our buck, per se? We use a risk assessment and focus on where the risk is. So that's the number one and most important reason. Second one is inconsistencies between the different systems. So there's not one centralized system that handles all our inspections. We have a billing system, and that's different than our scheduling system. And within the scheduling sides, we have a state system for Coupa that handles the inspections. We have CSI, which I'm sure you've heard of from the other audits. It's not a inspection system per se, but we use it as an inspection system for fire life safety inspection. So they're different systems, and their differences, and they don't talk to each other, and there are differences in the numbers, and it's just really a lot of work to reconcile them, and some of the discrepancies we saw was as a result of this lack of communications between the systems. And then finally, lack of personnel designated with analytical and reporting responsibilities. Just basically the number crunchers needed to make sense of the different systems and where we are at any given point in time. If I asked you for industrial waste inspections, right now, where are we? How many have we done? How many do we need to do? What are the violations for this? It's not just a matter of running an easy report. There's a lot of work that needs to go into getting that information that any manager would need to be able to do their job effectively. So those are the main reasons why we feel the state is where it was at. And our recommendation is to prioritize mandated inspections first and foremost. So do what we need to do first. And then secondly, conduct a risk assessment for all the remaining inspections. And all of our observations that we have in the report, they kind of support this overall conclusion. And so that's why I thought this key outcome was a good slide to present to you, rather than going into the minutia of, this. Next slide, please. This is kind of giving you a little bit of a flavor of where we have some flexibility. So like we have fire life safety, Coupa, industrial waste, the programmatic inspections, and new construction. The first bucket on the left is basically saying is what's required, and then the second one is we have some flexibility. Like there is no defined interval. So if when you could see there's a lot of flexibility with industrial waste, fire life safety, even Coupa inspections. So all of them have mandated inspection intervals. They all have to be inspected once every 3 years, with exception of underground storage tanks, which require once every year. So we don't have flexibility on how often we could do it, but we do have flexibility in that do we want to do Coupa inspections at all? There's different elements within the Coupa inspections. So right now we're a full Coupa agency, meaning we do them all, but we could pick a few of them and delegate the other ones to the County of Los Angeles. And that's I did mention that in the audit report. So even though we don't have flexibility on the interval here, we do have flexibility on if we want to do this at all or not. So there's quite a bit of maneuvering we could do just based on the risk assessment of to first, we got to do what we need. We should be able to do what we are assigned to do completely. And when I say completely, it's all those elements before I mentioned and what goes into performing an inspection. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of results. Our audit identified 12 observations, 1 priority 1, 7 priority 2s, 4 priority 3s, and we also identified 4 innovation opportunities where they're going to request the innovation side of our house to assist with some of their completions. Next slide. So I highlighted a few observations that I thought would be important. This is a priority 1 observation, and this is essentially what I already mentioned. I'll be brief. It's basically mandatory inspections are not being completed and risk assessments are not being performed. Therefore, prioritize mandatory inspections and perform a risk assessment, as I mentioned earlier. Next slide. So this observation relates to Coupa inspections. Remember, Coupa inspections are one of the 3 programmatic inspections. When we have a violation that we find for a business, those violations are logged into a state system called SIRS. And so after 30 days, any unaddressed violations are supposed to be bumped up to the next violation. So they have 3 categorizations. Just think of it as high risk, medium risk, and low risk. So if you have a low risk finding that hasn't been implemented in 30 days, it's supposed to go to a medium risk then, and then button to the top. And then we are also allowed to assess financial penalties, but we're not bumping up the violations after the 30-day mark, and we're not assessing financial penalties generally on violations. And then the third bullet is when we ran the report April 5th, 2018, there were about 1,200 violations. 76% were closed, but it took an average of 179 days to close them. 287 were still open, 24%, and they were open on average of 627 days. So essentially, we're not monitoring this system as it's required to be. And so our recommendation is to bump up the violations after 30 days, assess financial penalties, which would provide revenue to the city, and as well as encourage customers to act when there's a financial penalty assessed, of course, and then track the system just to make sure we're doing what we need to be doing. Next slide. And this is just a supporting how we came up to the conclusion that they're not being performed timely. There's the 2 elements of the Coupa inspection: underground storage tank UST and above ground storage tank. There are other ones, but I only called out the 2. So this is showing like almost more than half aren't being inspected within the time frames that the state mandated. Fire life safety, about 100 of the 700 haven't been inspected within the time frame. This one actually is in a better shape than the other ones, but nonetheless, it's still, there's somewhat of an issue there. And then industrial waste, 145 of the 227 haven't been inspected within the time frames. And then these are the time frames that they established. As a Fire Prevention Bureau, we want to do everything annually, right? So this is saying they're not done. They're not being done annually. But we do have flexibility, as I mentioned before, and we should tweak this to make it more realistic. And this, like I said, this is also other agencies have communicated the same issues that they're dealing with as well. That in a nutshell is the audit. We have, I could answer any questions you have for the audit. We also have management from the Fire Prevention Bureau that could answer any specifics you may have.
Thank you, Samil. I have a couple questions just before we start off. Can you briefly explain the organizational structure of the FPB in terms of how it falls under it, if it does, the fire department, and just explain how that organizational structure works for the fire department?
Yeah, so it is under the fire department.
Okay.
Doug, would you like any more?
Good
Good morning. Doug Nichols, Assistant Fire Marshal with the Fire Prevention Bureau.
Good morning.
Yes, we do fall within the fire department structure. The fire marshal is the oversight for the Fire Prevention Bureau, reports to the deputy fire chief, which also reports to the fire chief, and that is our structure. And then within the organization of the Fire Prevention Bureau, obviously we interact with other departments, but we are an entity to ourselves, work with the fire department. We do oversee some of the fire prevention activities, even that might be conducted by the operations side of the shop, but we do fall within the fire department.
Thank you. So, just so that I understand, do you hire your own personnel, or is it firefighters on rotation? How does that work? Can you explain how that goes for me?
Certainly. Yes, we do have a completely civilian professional staff that is separate from the sworn firefighter staff. In years past, that had been different, but right now we do have a completely sworn. We were overseen by a battalion chief who is recently retired, actually as of the end of this week. But otherwise, all personnel are civilian, non-sworn employees within the Fire Prevention Bureau.
And then what type of training does one undergo when they come into the organization?
Well, we actually require some level of education and training prior to coming to the Fire Prevention Bureau, but because we have different responsibilities, as Samil was pointing out, we have a fire and life safety group, we have a plan check group, we have some hazardous materials group, industrial waste. So it's hard to find someone who has all that experience coming in. So we'll try and find folks who have maybe a particular expertise that we can utilize right away. And then as we need to, train them up and educate them on some of the other areas so we can have a little more of a crossover and be a little more fluid in how we assign and task personnel. But we like to rely on them as an expert in their area and then make sure they're familiar with the operations throughout the entire Fire Prevention Bureau. But we certainly don't want to put someone in a position where they're expected to do something that they're not trained for, so we do have a lot of internal training. We also have a lot of annual training. There are several conferences that we can attend, as well as regional conferences, and even a number of monthly committee meetings that a lot of folks will attend. So it's a constant evolving process. As you might imagine, being an agency that undertakes a lot of inspections that are mandated by the state. There are state changes in the rules and regulations, whether it be the fire code or the Cal EPA, some of the environmental codes. So we always have to keep up to date with all those codes, and so it's a constant training process.
Thank you. And then I'll just go into a couple questions I have and then open it up, and you guys can jump in. You mentioned regarding Coupa and whether we should stay in it or not. How is that decision made of whether we participate in that or not?
That is actually going to be a broader decision that is obviously within the Fire Prevention Bureau. There are a number of components to that. As a Coupa, we are actually an extension of 5 different state agencies, all under the umbrella of Cal EPA. And so we're actually performing inspections that if we weren't conducting it, and in the past, before there was such thing as a Coupa, which stands for a Certified Unified Public Agency, because they've unified all the expectations and the inspections of these different agencies, and they've placed them with the opportunity but also the burden of the inspections for the local agency. So we would need to obviously have concurrence with those state agencies and the Cal EPA, and then also the other agencies that might be taking on those responsibilities. For example, in the County of Los Angeles, there are, I believe, 6 different Coupas. One is the county itself, and then there are a number of agencies like City of Los Angeles, City of Vernon, Santa Fe Springs, Glendale, I think El Segundo is as well. And then they have like what they call kind of a subcategory or a participating agency, which might do just a few of those inspections. I believe Burbank would be an example of something like that because they just wanted to do a couple of those elements or programs that are within the overall Coupa. So depending on how that might play out, we're just depending on which ones we would choose to not do or to undo. We'd have to work with the state, with obviously the city ourselves, with our neighboring agencies, and then whichever agency would be tasked with taking on that responsibility. And we've never really entertained this before or really explored it further. It was something that came out in the audit, so we've just kind of been exploring that as to what that might mean. Not sure if we would go there or what the implications or complications would be. I know there are opportunities for there. It's just a matter of whether it's a beneficial decision to the city, to the bureau, and actually to the residents. So it'd be a lot of decisions to be made in order to head that direction.
I mean, would you briefly go over what the benefits might be of not participating versus participating?
There's I'll give you a good example. There is one of the programs called CalARP, which is abbreviation for California Accidental Release Program, for above ground storage tanks where a facility has in excess of capacity of 1,320 gallons. They don't have to have that much product on site, but they have to have that much capacity on site. So they may fluctuate as far as what they actually have as far as those containers being full or empty. But if they haven't had that capacity, they fall within that program, which now they require certain secondary containment responsibilities. So if there were a failure of that container, now that secondary containment will hold that intact until it can be properly cleaned up and disposed of. We have 2 of those facilities in the city. So we have to do a lot of training and kind of gearing up to be available to inspect those 2 facilities once every 3 years. In comparison, the County of Los Angeles, because of the refineries and a lot of products that they are doing this time and again every day. And so obviously their efficiency at doing that and their expertise would be more than ours because they're more comfortable with it, more familiar with it. Now we do, I think, a good job because we are very familiar with those particular couple of sites. But it just shows you how much time we have to spend to get prepared for it just for those 2 facilities. So that's the type of thing where you might say, well, is the cost benefit really worth it to maintain our expertise for 2 facilities that another agency might be equally equipped to manage, and it wouldn't make much difference to them to take on 2 more sites.
The priority 1 finding in this particular audit mentioned that right now your inspections are not risk-based. What are they based on?
Well, because of the different programs that we have, and I'll use the fire and life safety for one, a lot of those are permit-based, where we are doing them because we have a permit that's assigned, that we are entitled by the fire code to actually issue a permit and then conduct inspections. But we have identified a number of type of occupancies, as they're referred to, or buildings or facilities that would warrant those types of permits. Also within that same category is what are some state mandated requirements for inspection. One of those being high-rise buildings, the second one being multifamily dwellings. We have about 26 high-rise buildings, and we are mandated by the state to inspect those every year. We have almost 4,000 multifamily dwellings that we are required by the state to inspect every year. None of the multifamily dwellings are permitted. It's just a mandate. We have to do it by the state. We do also issue permits for the high rises locally, local permits, because we want to track them a little more closely. Certain expectations that we have, very concerned about high-rise structures and the exiting and such that goes with them, fire protection systems. So we kind of hold them to a higher level of what would be expected locally as well as with the state. So we are required by the state to conduct those inspections every year. So we just know we got to get there every year. Every year we conduct those. Now some of the others that we permit, and so another example of that would be our mid-rise or low-rise category, where we issue permits for those at the local level. They are not required to be required by the state as a mandated inspection. Yet we felt there was some benefit to do that because several years ago we had a retrofit ordinance that required them to be sprinklered with automatic fire sprinkler systems. And so we kind of wrapped that all together. Well, we found in the intervening years that some of these low-rise or mid-rise buildings that are mostly office complexes are kind of a low risk, and yet they still fall within our permitting process that require an annual inspection. So as we talked to Samil, we realized, well, if we did this risk analysis, maybe we could find that, yes, high-rise structures are still high risk because there's a lot of people go in there every day that have never been in there before. but then there is maybe a low rise, which would be like a 4-story office building. The same people go in every day, that's come out every day, not a whole lot of visitors, not a whole lot of transients. That would be a low risk type of facility. So I thought, well, if we could maybe reduce the number of inspections, maybe every other year, every third year, every fifth year, and kind of reduce that a little bit, that would reduce the workload. And yet, because it's a low-risk facility, that we wouldn't maybe be so concerned about that one, and just make sure we keep it on a regular inspection, but not on an annual inspection. So as we try to kind of waver back and forth on where these fall, that's an option for us. Within the CUPA requirements for hazardous materials, those are mandated by those agencies every 3 years regardless. But if we do a risk assessment, maybe we could identify, well, which ones maybe are more at risk. We get those earlier in the year and make sure we get to those real quick, and some of those are maybe lower risk towards the back end. And likewise with some of the industrial waste, as a comparison for those, we have a couple facilities in town that do chromium plating. Have a lot of material that are subject to potential discharge into our wastewater stream that we want to regulate and make sure that we take care of that. We sample those facilities every quarter, make sure that they're maintained within the Cal EPA and also the federal EPA requirements for discharge limits. Along that same token, dentist offices are also required for annual inspections. Well, you can imagine the dichotomy between what you might find in a dentist office, which is amalgam and amalgam only, perhaps silver, which we're kind of getting away from. Everything's going digital these days, and yet they're both put in the same category of annual inspections. We thought, okay, not much happens differently in a dentist office from year to year, except if they quit doing the amalgam and they're going into digital processing of some of their x-rays. So if we can scale some of those back to again more infrequent inspections, be able to spend more of our time with those facilities that we know are very, very high risk, that would be a win for us, where we could reduce some of that workload, push that off, still maintain what we think is a reasonable level of inspections, but again, focus our time and attention on some of those that we know are truly a high-risk facility.
And last question for me, there was a mention that the systems don't talk to each other. And can you give us what your impression is from within the FSB of how big of a problem that creates?
It's been a challenge for us. We've tried to work around it. We're doing the best we can, but you're right, they don't talk. And the two systems in particular is we have our community services, our CSI, community services interface, where we try to work with the building and safety departments and all the departments citywide, where they all use the same system for managing permits throughout the entire city. We conduct our inspections and track all those within the CSI system. Because there was no billing component or billing module within that, and actually prior to CSI when we had the Kiva system, we used the GWP customer service organization. Of course, they use the Harris North Star system to do their billing on a monthly basis. And so we worked out an arrangement with them to do our annual billing for issuing permits. And we've been doing that for a number of years, and it's worked quite well. Unfortunately, there is no link between those two systems. They don't communicate with each other. And there's no common denominator that we can attach one to the other to kind of track them simultaneously. So we're trying to use parallel systems, or I guess two systems in a parallel process to manage it. So that's on us always. We're always having to manually review these, and track them on a regular basis. And as you can imagine, even I make mistakes periodically, and so I'll be reviewing those and finding every year either we had something we shouldn't or missed something that we should. And it's a constant process that we have to maintain. But until we can get something that links and syncs up, we're stuck with maintaining those two systems. I do believe as we're moving towards the Munis system that we'll have more opportunities for some invoicing where that system will now be unified. We're working that direction, but as of now, we realize we've got these two systems and we're using them as best we can, understanding that they don't communicate.
And just in listening to you right now, I'm trying to understand how much of this is going to require you to kind of talk about yourself. How much of what the FPB does, given the limitations that you currently have, depend upon your direct input into the system, you personally? And as a follow-up, is there a kind of a duplication process there, so that it doesn't depend upon one person's input into so many different things to ensure that it runs smoothly.
Well, thankfully, I don't have to do everything. I think we do have a team, and actually with the team with GWP, the team with IS, and the team within fire prevention, we all work together. And so we understand what those challenges are. We continue to work with those. So it's not as though I'm having to do everything. Having been with the department for 27 years, all with the Fire Prevention Bureau, I kind of have known this from years. And so I've been making sure that our staff is very familiar with what's coming up and what they need to be involved with. And we have a number of staff that have been with the department that entire length of time as well. So it's been something that we've kind of become accustomed to and understand what needs to be done, and there's a number of people that have. Doesn't make it perfect, but we've been able to make it work as best possible. So I think as we continue to move forward, it's a matter of trying to eliminate that interaction or intervention that's necessary. We do have a lot of reporting systems that are in place that come up every month that give us little triggers of what needs to be taking place. And so we rely on those reports as well to make sure that they match up and that we're not missing anything. But I believe that the teamwork that we have set up with the three departments in particular has served us well. And until we can get a complete, but I don't know if it's complete to a solution to it, at least a better solution to it, we've been doing as best we can to keep this thing working.
Thank you from me.
I have a question. So, timeline flow of when you report to is a GWP an employee in regards to the billing process. So how does that work, though? Because it looks like, there's a lot of uncollected bills out there. So is there a dedicated FTE that works hand in hand with the FPB?
Within the GWP,
Yeah.
no, there's no one dedicated. Again, they have a team of people that we interact with, and there's a number of individuals that we work with on a regular basis. But I don't know if there's anybody dedicated to fire prevention. Likewise, in fire prevention, there's no one specifically dedicated to just handling the billing process, although we do have a number of staff that assist with it. We try to work in such a way where we don't have to rely on a single individual, but that we have a team approach so that a number of people are involved with it and able to work with that system. But what we do have is a process where we work with them on an annual basis. So like right now, October, November, we're gearing up for our annual billing, which goes out in December. And so we've been working all year to keep that up to date. And as changes come, new businesses come and go. Every day we have businesses opening and closing. So as we get that information, we're continually passing that on to GWP to make sure that system is in place, and also with our prevention tracking records to make sure we know which ones are in need of inspections or are not.
Now, anyone knows the answer to this, which is we have 237 accounts. Do you guys know how past due are these? Is it several years past due, or is it just within 1 year?
I don't know if we got the information. Did you get that? Okay.
Yeah, so for you're talking about the open balance report,
Correct.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
so there were 237 accounts, and it's basically when we decide, show us all the accounts that have a balance of some type. So some of them have a cumulative balance going back many years. But it's not like one, it could be one, but that's what our recommendation was, to look into these to see how, but there are some that go far, many years back.
Okay, and what's the timeline of sending these to collections? I'm just saying more.
Yeah, so right now we haven't generally been sending these to collections. And part of that is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, is so like GWP, your electric bill, if you don't pay your electric bill, they could turn off your electricity. But if someone does not pay their fees for this, you can't shut their business down. We're limited as far as how much teeth we have in the enforcement process. But our recommendation was just do what we can and send it to collections so that they could at least attempt to collect. And if they can, great. If they can't, we at least did what we could do to collect on it.
Because right now, you just said there's some that have multiple invoices, which it tells me right now that, you know what, the city's not even trying hard to collect, they're not doing anything, so why should I pay it? I'm just, being honest from that standpoint. So, I mean, there has to be some sort of connection somewhere where it gets involved more, where, it's like now they're being pressured to actually pay these invoices. Otherwise, I mean, we're going to have all these accounts past due.
Yeah.
That are paid. I mean, we could easily be able to hire a couple more FTEs in the FPV business industry so that we can be able to, support this.
I don't know if you wanted to respond or.
To
This is a comment.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering. I'm looking here to try to see if I can find it, and apologies if I missed it, but clearly there are other cities. I'm thinking of cities in Northern California that are dealing with fires and fire prevention in new and hopefully innovative ways. And so I'm wondering if maybe there's opportunities to sort of emulate some of their best practices. Again, I'm trying to see if it's in here. I may have missed it.
Were you asking if there was?
I'm just asking if it was taken into consideration.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the biggest new thing that I've seen out there was the risk assessment itself. It's not just it's when you look into the best practice documentation. I spoke into the actual author who wrote the best practice guide for the fire industry. And he's saying this is something new, but it's something that's not going away, and that people are coming on board with the risk assessment to drive the approach of the inspection, not only inspection system, but just the fire departments as a whole. It involves community involvement. It involves taking a demographic poll of the cities in general. How many high rises do we have? How many low rises do we have? Where are they? It takes into account the data from our fire call centers. What kind of calls are we getting? And then you take all that information, and then that becomes your risk per se, and then you tailor your program and your fire department in general to address what the risks are. So that's something new that's out there. The biggest thing that I've seen out there, Doug, is probably better equipped to answer just the industry as a whole. If there's anything out there.
I just would second what Samil said, because the fire department is an organization well-versed in tradition, and the tradition in fire prevention has been you expect everything every year. It's just been kind of a routine. And now as we've seen the challenges of trying to get all that completed within a year, or trying to determine, well, is it really justified? I think this risk assessment, and in fact, there's organizations, or actually some organizations that are going towards a community risk program rather than just doing things as typical. It's just, well, where is our community most at risk, and looking at the community as a whole. And fire prevention is taking a lead in that. So I think this would be a good effort to point us in that direction. It's one of those things where we kind of thought, yeah, it might be helpful to assess that, and I think, which is partly why we asked Samil and his team to pull this information together for us and do this audit. So I think it definitely would benefit the city, particularly the Fire Prevention Bureau, to take a critical look at risk assessment and basically position us in a way where we can better serve the community.
I have a question. For your department size, which is 2.5 FTEs, I see, and your average days 179 days to close a violation, does that put you up to par to other cities our size? Does it mean you're understaffed? Does it mean you're overstaffed? I mean, can you give us one idea on that?
I don't know that we actually went through that much effort to compare numbers for numbers. I'll have to defer to Samil on that. But I know in a lot of the conversations we have in our monthly meetings, it's like a very similar conversation that people are stressed and pushed for trying to get things done. Everyone always has vacancies in their department and not able to get things done. We were able to hire several staff at the beginning part of this year, and the numbers that you're seeing reflects that last fiscal year. I think we've already made significant strides for this current fiscal year. We do a lot of our inspections on a calendar year basis. That helps with the community. They're more used to a January through December inspection process. But I do believe the numbers this coming year will be much improved over what you've seen here. And I think just being aware of it and having the foresight that we really haven't paid much, as close attention that we have this year. All the staff now are well-versed and have been participating in this. Samil has interviewed all of them, and they are fully aware. Now they understand what the numbers really mean. And that's part of what we're trying to emphasize now, is trying to get this forward. And one of the things we've also tried to emphasize is the more we enforce, the shorter those numbers will become. And word will get through the community that, oh, they are actually coming back when they said they were coming back. And so we've instituted a whole system now that we didn't have before on enforcement. And we got a process set up which wasn't clear to begin with. So I think that'll improve as well.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Samil.
Thank you everyone. Great job. We learned so much this morning from the fire. Already learned a lot, and then there's just a little more. So the next project we completed is the CDBG financial ratio tool that we have created for the CDBG agency applicants and the CDBG advisory committees to use. So if you recall our audit plan, it is called CDBG financial ratio calculation project. For the past number of years, that's been the same project. And since the audit committee raised questions on CDBG financial ratio calculation project, a lot have happened. So the project now is called CDBG financial ratios tool. So let me bring up a quick timeline when I give you a brief summary of what we've done. Let's see. So on April 23rd, 2018, at our regular audit committee meeting, the chair and I think every member on this committee requested a formal feedback from CDBG Advisory Committee on the value added by internal audit on performing financial ratio calculations. And I asked the questions whether there are other options rather than using internal audit resources to perform this kind of calculation. Hold on, sorry. So on August 13th, 2018, the staff brought the audit committee's request to the CDBG Advisory Committee, and we received their feedback and direction. So the detail of that response are included in the Parks Department staff prepared the implementation plan, and that was forwarded to you along with the agenda email. So basically, I guess three things we received the direction on. One is instead of performing the financial ratio calculation for the agencies, we would create a financial ratio tool to assist agencies and the Community Services and Parks Department staff in automating the financial ratio calculation and consolidating the submitted information for the CDBG Advisory Committee. And then the CDBG Advisory Committee also recommended to reduce the number of ratios from 6 to 3 with the focus on the agency's basically liquidity and the solvency. So the three ratios now they picked are the debt ratio, the defensive interval, and the reliance on source of income. So the agency applicants will be required to provide the financial ratios by using the ratios calculator we created for them. So between August 13 to September 27, Internal Audit developed a tool and conducted 2 demonstrations with the Community Services and Parks Department staff. And we also provided a summary memo along with the tool provided to the department on September 27. So on October 22nd, at their CDBG Advisory Committee meeting, staff from both departments presented the financial ratio tool, and I guess the chair of the CDBG committee's comment is she thinks the tool is pretty thorough, and I think the Parks Department staff did a good job on explaining the tool. So that tells me that they now have a good understanding of how this tool is going to work and help them compiling the information. So in summary, I guess after having done the ratio calculation for many years in the same way, I really appreciate this committee raised the question. And then I also appreciate the valuable feedback and directions from the CDBG Advisory Committee. And so I'm hoping that this dialogue between the members of these 2 committees and then the collaboration effort by the staff from the 2 departments will bring some positive changes to this process and to add more value. So where we're at right now is basically we decided to try this tool for a year and then to see, and continue to collect their feedback on whether we should further improve the tool, for example, to automate it or make it available online, or explore some other options. So overall, I guess I would like to thank Maggie and her team. They have accomplished a lot during this time frame, and they did a great job on following up your request and the questions with the CDBG Advisory Committee. So before I give you a quick demo of the tool, if you're interested.
We are.
Do you have any questions so far, or do you have any questions for staff from Parks Department?
Just quick question. How many hours were we averaging in terms of the audit, the annual audit to create the ratios for the CDBG?
So you're asking before the
Yes.
average? It's about 120 hours up to 160.
And then how many hours did it take to create the tool?
The actual design of the tool, it took me about a couple of days to put the tool together. But then, we, do the demos and, to show the department how it works and then present the tool to all the other things related to it. It's still about 30 hours.
Okay. Well, hopefully we get a win moving forward and we save those 120 to 160 hours annually.
Right.
Yeah, let's take a look at the tool, please.
And I just want to point out that, providing this tool will still continue to provide assistance as needed basis if you have, they have questions when using the tool. So let me go to template audit agency. So there are two parts in this tool. One is the ratio calculator for the agency to use, and the other is the summary table for the city staff to consolidate the information and then provide the CDBG advisory committee in a comparative format. So let me quick look at this. So this is it's a kind of straightforward calculator, 3 ratios. And then the part I want to mention is we require the agency, in addition to provide the numbers, we also ask them to provide their agency formula. So basically exactly what they call it. It's people call total liability. They may use different terms. And also the page number from the financial statement. So then this will help the agency, help city staff to verify the information once we receive them. And this is the summary table. So once the agency completed the information, so I created a fully, I call it, ABC charities. So then I've just quickly entered some numbers here. And then the page numbers, this is all required. So all the highlighted in beige area, the place they can enter. The rest will be protected, so they can't really touch those cells. So once this is done, it depends on how the city is going to request this information. It's probably by paper, but ideally, if they can submit it in electronic format, so all they need to do is they come here, then they do create a copy of it, and then add it to this template. So let me add it to agency here. So now this ABC charities are added to, among all the other agencies, and then we'll rename it to ABC charities. So this is important, the tab name, because the summary table we created will automatically pull the data from the tab we just added. So for example, these are all the ones we already added. So for the ones we just added, so if I type in ABC charities and enter, and all the numbers will be automatically populated. So if you recall, I guess when we go to the CDBG advisory committee to present our calculation in the past years, we always, telling them that ratios should not be viewed as a standalone basis. It will be more meaningful when they compare, historically, and also compare to the peers and the industry average. So this summary table does just that. So basically, we presented for each agency a 3 years ratio result. I mean, of course, if they have the information, and if they don't, it will be not available. And then to show the trend, so we create a quick trend line. They did have some questions on, the trend line. When it's NA, it dropped down to 0. So then you can do bar too. So then the NA will be, so for this first column, it will only have 2 bars instead of 3, if that's what they desire. And then we also, so for because we're putting everything together, so then you are automatically comparing from agencies to agencies. And another one is the rule of thumb. So basically, for example, the debt ratio. So we would like the debt ratio to be below 1. So then if anyone that has debt ratio above 1, like in this case, they will be automatically highlighted. So, and then similar to the other two as well. So for defensive interval, currently we set as, based on our rule of thumb, it's 3 months, after funding stopped, they can sustain for 3 months. But if the CDBG advisory committee want to be more conservative and set it up as, say, 5 months or 4, so say 5. And then, so more will be highlighted. So that's that. And then same way here. So reliance on source of income, from one source of income, if it's above 85% or above 90%. So if you see this line, they have 95, 95, 90. If I set the rule as 90%, and the 90 will not be highlighted. So we highlight these. The purpose of highlighting these ratios is just to provide the advisory committee easy, more obvious where the red flag is, and for them to basically ask additional questions. So I think that's pretty much the.
Looks good. I think we're all excited to see how it goes and how it's received, and we're looking forward to continued feedback from both the CDBG and staff as well. But good job. Anytime that you can take something that is a regular audit that takes 120 to 160 hours and create a tool that largely eliminates that use of hours, sounds like a win to me. And hopefully it serves the purpose that it was designed for, and we can move forward with using those hours for other purposes. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Close these. Right. So next section is project in progress. So we have 2 projects that currently in progress. One is refuse collection revenue audit, and the other is admin citation audit. Thank you, Maggie and Armine. So those 2 were targeted to complete these 2 projects by the end of this quarter. So then hopefully we'll present the result to you in at our January meeting. The next section is continuous auditing. So earlier I mentioned that under the completed project, there are additional ones here. We began to conduct a continuous auditing project in the fourth quarter of last year by using our Arbutus data analytics tool. So let's just take a look at the summary table together. So we listed the 3 test script run for this past quarter. The first one is a duplicate payment test. So this is to identify duplicate payments, obviously. So the project was completed by our internal auditor, Ani Atanishan. And for this one in particular, our test did not, and the review did not identify any additional duplicate payments. However, we did note that the accounts payable staff has stopped 21 duplicate payment requests. So this tells us that the controls that established by finance department is actually working. And the next one is a user access control.
Do you know what the total of those duplicate payment requests were? Total amount? Roughly speaking. I'm curious.
Do you remember?
I think it was about 48,000.
$48,000. Very good.
So the next one is a user access control test. There are two of them. One is any application, one is Active Directory. So the any application, so we've been doing this test for a long time. For each audit we do, often there are some sort of application systems involved in that operation. So we always perform this user access control test. But in the past, we do it with using Excel. But there are some data cleanup to do, as always. So we now use Hazardous to automate a lot of the data cleanup, such as to normalize the names, so to facilitate this process. So I mentioned the two in-progress audits we're doing right now. So both has a couple systems that we've conducted this test run. And then the last one is the user access control test on Active Directory. This is to make sure that the Active Directory users are for active employees. So this is the second test, second run of the same script or similar scripts. So the process should be we develop this script and then we run, and then each time we review those outliers, but then at the same time we also take a look into if there's a ways to improve the script. So for the next run, based on what we now know. So this test was conducted by Samuel. So I guess the challenges we're facing, it's quite common for continuous auditing. One is to make sure that how do we design the script to control the number of outliers? So supposedly the continuous auditing, the whole idea is so that we can do it more frequently. But if we have a huge amount of outliers that still require manual review by the auditors, then they will, be slowing us down. So ideally, the outliers should be around 25. But now both ones we have quite a high number of outliers.
How many?
For duplicate payment, about a few hundreds, right? Yeah, those, the test result, right? And then for the for the access control one, that one is a little, I think probably a little too big of a scope because we did 5 domains instead of, one. So, and then there's a lot of historical reason the data is not clean, and then there's a lot of things to clean up. Just give you an example. So when we create the Active Directory users for employees, we're not consistently entering their ID. So then, that's create. We basically. Ideally, we use the ID as the key to match against the employee listing. But if you don't have the ID, we'll have to go to the secondary matching. It's the name. But the name, the software did help us to normalize the name. It's a lot better than using Excel, do all that cleanup manually. But still, it could result false positives because people do have the same first name, last name. So, so that's the challenge we're facing. But since we started the continuous auditing project, we received tremendous support from the department we so far worked with, finance department, the human resources department, and information services department. and they've already started to make some good changes to how they manage the Active Directory account. For example, the vendor side, that's the part when you ask how many exceptions, because what we compare to is to the employee listing. We have no idea the vendors consultants users. So that part of the database is not centralized, so it's decentralized by each department. So they've implemented some new policies on how to manage that population.
Great.
So that's for that project. And then the next section is a follow-up status on outstanding audit issues. So for this past quarter, as usual, we conducted our quarterly follow-up with department that have outstanding audit items. So for the past quarter, we started out with 57 outstanding items and added 12 additional items from Samuel's audit. And 8 items have been implemented, with 1 not implemented. And that leaves us with 60 outstanding items at the end of the quarter. So if you take a look, so then there are 2 more sections that related to quarterly follow-up. One is the summary of outstanding priority 1 audit issues. So for priority 1 issues, per your request, that we'll list them in this report until they're resolved. So both items are not due yet. One, the anticipated implementation is December, and the other one is July 31st, 2019. You may ask that, priority 1, why take so long? That's a big item, and also due to the leadership change within the fire department, I think they need more time to work on this one issue. And then the next related to the quarterly follow-up is the, according to the resolution number 2, if the audit is not implemented, we will report them here. So this one the one that not implemented is from the parking meter shop audit. So basically, the city staff provide meter maintenance services for the GCC. However, we don't have a service agreement. That agreement, well, it's kind of some language in the joint power agreement with the GCC, but that agreement was, expired, and then the city and the college is in the process of creating another. It's either JPA or some other kind of agreement. So this item is a very small portion of that much bigger agreement. So we'll have to wait for that one, unfortunately. So as of this, already hit the 3-year mark. So we're not going to continue to follow up this item. I think it just, they need a little time, probably. We're quite close to get this one done. And then the last one is just our regular team assignment. So that's pretty much concluded the activity report. So if you have any questions.
Does anybody have questions regarding the homeless programs operations audit, which was a priority 1 audit issue that's outstanding? It looks like it's in progress and is anticipated to be completed by the end of this year. So if nobody has any questions, we won't bring them up. Very good. Okay. Thank you very much, staff. Let's move on to our next item, please.
Item number 7 is audit committee or staff comments.
As always, thank you for the work that went into these audits and preparing this special meeting for us. And thank you for the flexibility, again, of my fellow committee members in moving the date for a week. Let's move on to the next item, please.
Number 8 is new business.
Any new business? I see none. Let's move on to item number 9, which is adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.